Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror in detail. Today we're going to share Wendigo horror stories. First story. I'm related to a Wendigo. Sorry if the title seems abrupt. After reading this, it'll make sense. I hope. You've heard this story a million times before. I'm a teenager who recently moved to Minnesota. So recently, in fact, I can barely remember the town's name. Just search for generic towns on any search engine, and I'm certain it'll show up. I'm not going to try avoiding exposition because I feel inclined to share this information with as many online strangers as I can. I moved into the town a month ago with my mom and dad. I lived in Virginia before, so adapting to Minnesota was not something I was thrilled about. I had to leave the few friends I had. My parents assured me that I would find people to hang out with. I didn't really need any friends. I worked better alone. My parents let me bring my Xbox, but I believe they hoped I would leave it behind. Apparently, we moved here because my grandpa died. We are inheriting his fortune. When I first left the car, I set my eyes on the house. No, my house. I had to live there. It was a shack, if anything. It was a one-story house with faded log walls and a drywall interior. It had 2 bedrooms, a living room/kitchen, a bathroom, and an attic. My dad quickly monopolized the kitchen for his work. His laptop never left the island in the kitchen. My mom looked for a job around town. I explored the bleak house, hoping to find something fun. I'm bored. I complained to my dad. He shrugged. There's plenty of things to do around here. Go shopping, go explore the woods. Find people to hang out with. Wow, thanks for the help, I said, masking the sarcasm in my voice. The look he gave me told me I wasn't hiding it well. Maybe I didn't want to. I expected Grandpa's fortune to be grander, but what did I know? I never met him, at least when I was sentient. My dad raised his hand and gestured towards his birthmark, 2 red splotches on the palm. This mark means you're a son of the Barkley family. If you embarrass yourself, you're embarrassing your bloodline, he insisted. I rolled my eyes, being intentionally rebellious. You've said that a million times. I don't care anymore. Just go somewhere, I have a call. My father said, shooing me away like an animal. I grabbed my coat and went out the door. I walked down the sidewalk of the bustling town. The cars slowly drove past, their exhaust pipes producing fog in the cold, winter air. Everything foul here was fair in its own way. I guess their fumes propelled them towards their goal somehow. Unlike me, who was aimlessly walking until something interesting happened. I stumbled on the icy sidewalk before grabbing on to a streetlight. I heard snickering behind me. I turned to see a group of 3 teenagers. You new here? One asked, pulling his beanie over his ears. I nodded, nervously rubbing the outline of my birthmark on my left hand. Well, in that case, my name is James. He held out his gloved hand. I shook it politely. He examined me closely, his freckles seemingly popping out of his pale face in the cold. You really are new. I only assumed as much because you almost took a tumble there. He gestured toward the ground. I'm not the most graceful, I said. Anyway, who were the others with you? I asked. James turned to look at the other 2 teens. This guy here is Kyle. Upon hearing his name, he gave me a flimsy wave. Kyle had messy blonde hair and was taller than the other 2. He could pass for a surfer if he had a tan, which he didn't. The other person was a girl. She quickly introduced herself as Lucy. She had long, slightly curly hair, a wide face, and an expression I could only summarize as irritation. Can we go now? She asked James. Not yet. We got to welcome the guy. There ain't many kids around here, remember? He said. Lucy scowled. Our group is fine. We don't need anyone else to hang out with. She wrapped her scarf around her neck. Kyle shrugged. I don't care what he does. Wait a minute. What's your name, anyway? He turned to me. My name is Drew. Andrew, if you're feeling brave. I said jokingly. All right, Andrew, Lucy said, her voice dripping with venom. We have to go now. What did I do to this woman? I didn't understand. James gave me an apologetic look. I guess we better be going. James said, wait, one more thing. I interjected. He turned around and raised an eyebrow, waiting for me to elaborate. Where's the candy store? I asked. Kyle pointed to a store on the other side of the street as they left. They were a bit standoffish, but at least they weren't pricks. I crossed the street, entered the candy store, and purchased an overpriced bag of nameless gummy worms. I left the store, pushing open the glass door as the bell rang. I wandered through the town, mapping every building as I got closer to the woods. I reached the border between the town and the forest. The trees were bare, devoid of leaves. Even still, the forest seemed thick and unforgiving. I stepped into the woods and wandered aimlessly. The bitter winter air nipped at my nose and cheeks, making me regret not wearing a scarf. "Hello," a voice called out from the darkness. I perked up at the sudden voice. "Who's there?" I asked, realizing too late that my voice was unsteady and nervous. Not a good first impression on my end. "I don't know who you are," the voice said. I tilted my head, trying to get the unknown person to see my confusion. "Where are you?" I asked the woods. The cold breeze stirred dead leaves past me. "You are new." It spoke once again. Its voice was mystical, as if blending with the wind. Maybe it was the wind looking back. Even so, it spoke words I could understand. I chewed on a sour gummy worm. "I am hungry," the wind said. I held out a gummy worm. "Do you want some of my food?" I asked. I don't know why I even bothered talking to whatever it was. The voice paused, as if it was thinking. A rattling sound echoed through the forest. Maybe it was a woodpecker. "I'm starving," its voice lowered, sounding raspy. I tossed the bag of candy into the forest, wasting $13. I gave him my food. "Eat all you want." I heard loud footsteps crunching in the snow. Tick-tick, clack-clack. Unknown sounds echoed through the forest. The footsteps came closer. A dog rushed past me from behind, barking into the woods. I looked down, startled slightly at the Labrador. It barked aggressively, its tail pointed upright. An older man rushed over to the dog, grabbing its collar. He turned to me. "Sorry, kid," he said. "Mabel gets loose too often, but I always know to find her here." He chuckled. He went silent and turned to the forest. A bird called out from the woods. He grimaced. "Kid," he turned to me, "don't go in there. Hunters could shoot you on accident, you could get lost, you could even drown in the lake. Stay very well away." I nodded. "What about the guy in the forest? Isn't he in danger too?" His expression grew concerned. "There's nobody in there." The wind whistles through the thick branches. "It sounds almost like voices," he said. I felt like he didn't believe in his own reasoning. He sighed. "You new here?" he observed. I confirmed his statement. He cleared his throat, petting his dog's yellow fur. "Listen up then. These woods aren't safe, but..." His expression darkened. "It can, at times, be safer than the town." I insisted he elaborate. "The town has frequent famines. Food spoils and berries stop being as plentiful. We don't get a lot of imports, either. When we get bad storms, we have to rely on stored canned goods. It isn't nearly as bad as it once was. Even if food is readily available, the danger is still there." "What do you mean?" I asked. "I'm saying that people abandon their humanity. They eat each other when everything dries up. There isn't always a justification to it. People just snap." I was at a loss for words. He sighed. "It isn't like that anymore. We haven't had an incident in 5 years. So why warn me?" I asked. He paused. "Because it isn't going to stop, as long as it still breathes." He muttered, looking at the forest. I asked. "It lives in the woods. It never bothered people physically, just cursed them in a way. Until a few months ago, that is. We've started to distance our kids from the forest where it lives." Mabel whimpered and dropped her tail low. I groaned. "What is it?" I said, getting impatient. I wasn't willing to hear a vague campfire story. "It's a wendigo, a beast of Indian native folklore." "Do you know what they are?" he asked. I nodded. "I've seen YouTube videos on them, even read a few books." "You think a cryptid is out there?" He stared into the forest. "Absolutely. They don't believe me, but as long as one person believes, the Wendigo will be more cautious in its approach. You came here not long after the old man died. Why is that?" he asked me. If you're referring to Clarence Barkley, he's my grandfather. I explained. My condolences, the man said. No worries, I never knew him anyway. I said reassuringly. The trees creaked and branches snapped. A strong gust of wind blew past. Oh, he said. Good for you. Was he an asshole? I asked. He shrugged. He was entitled and snobby, as most rich people are. He was usually secluded, though. The man explained. He rarely came into town, and when he did, it was usually to buy meat. Lots of meat. Apparently, my grandfather was aloof. He stayed out of everyone's way when he could. He wasn't the nicest when people met him, though. So why did you ask why I came here? I asked. Nobody ever comes here unless they have something to gain from it. I'm assuming you were claiming his will. Yeah, that's about it. I said. The man exhaled and watched the trees. Do you know how to become a Wendigo? He asked me. I haven't really tried before. I said sarcastically, but I do know how they come to be. Good. Try not to lose yourself. If you get hungry, eat whatever you can find. If you want more personal things, pray to God. Be happy with what you have. The man said, I'm familiar with that stuff. I'm a good person, or I try to be. I explained. The man chuckled. Just keep it in mind. Mabel tucked her tail between her legs and whimpered as she stared into the forest. The old man sighed. Looks like I should head back. He waved goodbye as he walked his dog home. I went home after that. I entered the house, knocked off my boots, and peeled away at my winter gear until I was back into my casual attire. My father was busy on his computer, picking up work calls. He groaned. God damn it. This is not the right time for a prank call. He stormed off, dropping the phone on the table. I heard the bathroom door slam shut. I crept over to the phone and held it to my ear curiously. On the other end was static. How is it a prank call? It could be an accidental dial. The phone suddenly picked up a new sound. It sounded like TV static, but it increased in volume slowly. After about 10 seconds, the sound was a deafening screech. I hung up the phone. I decided to snoop around the house, looking for any stuff left behind. I wish we inherited the mansion, but the repair costs would double our debt. I blew the dust off of an old laptop someone left for some reason. It was even plugged in and fully charged. I turned on a laptop. Despite being a newer model, the laptop only had retro games. I decided to play Doom instead. If this computer belonged to my grandpa, he had good taste. After 30 minutes of Doom, I played some sort of deer hunting game. It was 3D, but very primitive for a 3D game. The deer were basically advanced polygons. I aimed my cursor at a moving deer, causing it to activate a cutscene of the bullet traveling towards the deer. Before the bullet hit, the color of the screen inverted and crackled with a buzzing static. The deer's peaceful black eyes glowed white. Its face almost twisted into a sadistic smile. Of course, it was just a weird glitch. The deer's antlers multiplied in size as the 3D model began to lose its form. The computer shut itself off. I sighed and stuffed the laptop into a drawer. I was going to get it fixed eventually, so I don't have to buy any duplicate games on my Xbox. Over the next few weeks, everything just got worse. The voice in the wilderness kept talking, although by now I had ignored it completely. Everything was fine until it said my name. I walked by the forest entrance to go to school and meet up with my friends and Lucy. Alwindriu, the voice called out like a taunting child. I froze and turned to the forest. How do you know my name? The words sat on the edge of my tongue. At the last moment, I held those words back. If I gave the thing any attention, I would surely regret it. The wind rattled the dead branches like some sort of bony wind chime. The icy air felt like daggers on my skin. I walked away, resuming my travels. Andrew, it rasped. I ignored it. You've grown so much since the last time I saw you, it said clear as day. I continued to walk away. It was just saying that to get my attention, whatever it was. This Wendigo has been a pain for quite some time. I wasn't going to give it the satisfaction. It went silent as I walked away. As I walked down the road, I noticed a dead deer on the curb. I walked around it, but a few minutes later, that task would be impossible. The entire road was flooded with dead deer. Piles upon piles of corpses littered the streets, bleeding into the drainage systems. Even getting near the pile sent an overwhelming stench towards me. I vomited in the grass. The putrid odor rattled my systems and brought me to my knees. The corpses were suddenly dragged one by one into the bushes. My head pounded as I tried my best to get away. I felt a lanky, cold hand grab my ankle and drag me away slowly. I turned around to see white eyes staring at me from the bushes, concealed in the morning darkness. The extended bony arm tugged weakly. The silver eyes never left me. Its translucent, pale skin crinkled with every movement, as if it was too tight for its own body. The faint outline of its humanoid face made me wish I was dead beforehand. I dug my nails into the concrete road, desperately trying to anchor myself. As I was dragged closer to the bushes, I could see its disgusting human teeth emerge from the shadows to devour me. I used my free leg to kick the face of the hollow creature. It groaned in pain and released me. I made a mad dash for the school, stumbling over the corpses of deer. When I assumed I was safe, I turned around to see the largest deer in the pile being dismembered by the arms. The head was ripped off with a sound I could only compare to a tree snapping. That deer must have lived for at least a decade. Now, its elder antlers were being brandished by an imposter. I made it to school, which probably wasn't the best idea. I was so distracted by what just happened that it didn't occur to me that I was covered in deer blood. The classroom shrieked in fear, dragging me out of my brain-dead state. I was brought into the counselor's office for questioning. They didn't believe my story until they looked out the window. Of course, I never mentioned the actual Wendigo. I just said that a herd of deer died, which wasn't false, but not completely true either. I was certain it was the Wendigo. It was starving and undoubtedly bloodthirsty. It was also cold. Its touch was like the pole of a stop sign in winter. They eventually gave me some temporary clothes and sent me on my way. In third period, an ear-splitting scream rang from the forest. It sounded like a mix of human, elk, and electronic static. It was impossibly loud, causing us to plug in headphones or cover our ears. The sound continued for the next week. Our town adapted quickly. We learned some basic hand signals and got very good at understanding body language. The town became barren of all animals. Deer had migrated to a new area. Dogs fled to find safety, ending up in ditches or dumpsters. I found Mabel under my bed, which scared the hell out of me. I was sitting on my couch when my mom motioned for me to take out my earbuds. I was greeted with the sound of silence. I almost teared up in joy. Authorities investigated the source of the sound with no success. They couldn't even blame anything. The mayor eventually told the town not to worry about it. To no one's surprise, everyone kept worrying about it. I wandered through the cold town. I bought candy, as usual, and went on with my day. James, Kyle, and Lucy intercepted me. Long time no see. James said to me, "We thought it was you that was screaming all week," he said jokingly. "What do you want from me?" I said, realizing too late that it sounded rude and confrontational. Luckily, James didn't pick up on the change of tone. "We want to go exploring." Kyle said, "They want you to come with them." "It wasn't my idea." Lucy said, "Thanks." I said, "So, where are we going?" "We're going to go to the old mansion in the woods. It'll be just like one of those old movies." "You in?" James said excitedly. Every instinct I had knew to decline his offer. No sane person would randomly wander into the woods. That's not only dangerous, but stupid. "Sure, I'll go." Lucy sighed, likely hoping I would decline. I'm not the best at understanding social cues, so I have no clue why this chick was so pissed at me. Maybe she had a crush on me. That would be cool. "When are we going?" I asked. "Now." James answered quickly. I didn't bother asking if they had all the supplies. Lucy had a comically large backpack strapped onto her shoulders. Despite being shorter than all of us, she was the strongest by far. What a terrifying combination. We made our way through the frozen forest. The only sound we heard was our footsteps. When we got closer to the manor, we occasionally heard disembodied voices conversing from somewhere in the woods. Are others here? I asked nervously. It occurred to me that this was my grandfather's house. At least it looked much better in the pictures. The windows weren't boarded up back then. Those voices are always there, Kyle said as we reached the front porch. We opened the door, which was strangely unlocked. At least it made me feel less uneasy about breaking into my grandfather's house. When we entered the manor, I realized why my family had our own house. The mansion was run down, overwhelmed with cobwebs and deep scrapes in the wood. It looked as if a bear had been living here. Lucy aimed the flashlight around, the bright light waving in the darkness. The light reflected off of a bleached deer skull with large antlers that had been mounted on the wall. We went up the stairs. The door to the bathroom was locked. Lucy slammed into the door, snapping it in half. We ducked under the broken door and stared into the bathtub. The entire tub was filled with decayed chicken bones and decomposed meat. Geez, the old man was a glutton, James remarked. Bones were haphazardly thrown around the bathroom. We dug through the pile, looking for something of value. There was nothing. Kyle scoffed. Maybe he took his money to the grave. We aren't digging him up, are we? I asked. There's no body. James said. Even his death is shrouded in mystery, he said ominously, expecting a fearful reaction from one of us. Kyle exhaled. It isn't as deep as you make it seem. Dead branches tapped against the window. The cold breeze made the house feel somewhat smaller. I couldn't help but notice that the tree looked off. It was like one of those insects that look like leaves. They look like a leaf, but they're alive. We continued snooping around the rooms, splitting up along the way. I went back to the front door and began to close it, as we had left it open before. The voice called out from the forest. You heard my call. It spoke. I closed the door. I chose to ignore it as usual. I was desensitized to it at this point. It hasn't done much to me so far, so I doubt it could deal any real damage. It continued talking as I walked away from the door. I snooped around for a bit longer. Nothing gathered my interest. For a mansion, it was absolutely disgusting. The door rattled as the wind beat against it. I should have known better then. Blaming things on the wind only got me so far. From upstairs, I watched with bated breath as the doorknob clicked and opened. The room grew cold, and a draft embraced me. Snow glistened against the dusty carpet. The door creaked open completely. Standing on the porch was something I couldn't begin to explain. It had two long, emaciated legs. It could be human, but the hooves denied my reasoning. Massive bony hands hung down from its body, its slender fingers twitching and clicking claws together. Multicolored fur coated most of the body in brutal patches, like a shaven dog. No, it was as if it put the fur on itself. One hooved foot tapped against the floor as it began to step inside. As it crouched down, I could see its exposed rib cage hugging a sack of organs weakly inside it. Before I could view its visage, I backed away from the upstairs balcony and into a bedroom. I peeked behind the doorway, waiting for something to happen. The long hand rose from under the balcony. It reached for the skull mounted on the wall. The skull disconnected and fell down into the large hands of the entity. After a brief period of silence, the antlers rose from behind the edge of the balcony. The two hands gripped onto the fence as the thing pulled its whole mass up. The skull was no decoration, it was a mask. The deer skull looked as dead as ever. The eye sockets were empty except for a tiny silver light in each eye. The carpet near the thing froze. The thing's eyes never left me as it stretched its hand closer to me. It was almost like the arm was extending according to the will of the life form, if you could even call a life form. I breathed heavily, fear washing over. My breath escaped my lips, small clouds of warm steam. I was so concentrated on the Wendigo that I forgot I hadn't come here alone. Kyle had appeared in the doorway, staring at the starving creature. It was so hungry, I just knew it. My primal instincts told me to feed it. I extended my hand hesitantly. The Wendigo directed its clawed hand to me. My finger nudged the cold keratin as we connected. Drew, Kyle squeaked. I slowly turned to him. Kyle backed away from the balcony. The Wendigo pressed the side of its face against the fence, its mouth agape. I could see the humanoid mouth behind the deer skull, dripping with saliva. Its silver eye peered at me. It panted and groaned, trying to inch closer to me. "Drew, stop," Kyle pleaded. I stared at him blankly. The Wendigo knocked over a coffee table, shattering some sort of glass object as it pressed itself against the upstairs balcony. A hand gripped my wrist and yanked me away. I turned to see Lucy scowling at me. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she hissed. I hadn't noticed her when I entered the room, so her startling me didn't help my situation. I explained to her that it felt natural, like putting your foot in a shoe or popping your back. It was instinctual. She looked at me like I was crazy. I couldn't blame her. The Wendigo panted, its swollen bovine tongue hanging out the side of its mouth. Lucy squeezed my wrist harder, then let go. "Fine. Be difficult for everyone. I personally don't care if you die or not." She sighed. "But they do." I wasn't sure what she meant. She noticed my confused expression. "You have friends, remember? They care about you. And since I care for them, I don't want them to be grief-stricken. They already have me." She frowned, realizing she said too much. I heard the voice of James shout in fear. The Wendigo turned to see him. Its inner mouth twisted into a frustrated grin. Its gums bled as the jaw squeezed shut. "Jesus," James said in terror. The Wendigo thrust its clawed finger at where I believed James was. I heard a cough, groan, and thud as James collapsed. It dragged James's corpse to the edge and picked it up. I heard the unmistakable sound of chewing, crunching, and ripping. I knew it was safe. I stood up and walked out of my hiding place, down the stairs, past the feeding creature, and out into the cold forest. I averted my gaze from the thing as it ate. I could hear the swaying of its bushy, matted tail. My fear suddenly returned when I left the mansion. My friend was being devoured messily by a beast of folklore. It almost killed me, and I let it. I heard a creak as Lucy and Kyle crept out of the building. The Wendigo gurgled and turned to face us. Its large body was barely illuminated in the dark mansion, yet the crimson blood was clearly visible pooling at its feet. The two looked up at me with a look of pure terror. They descended the porch stairs and stood behind me. The Wendigo stood up, its joints popping and cracking. A gurgle resonated deep in its maw as blood trickled out from its deer skull. Its fingers twitched with every movement. Paralyzed with fear, I could only stare as it made its way towards the front door. A picture frame fell from the wall and landed at the hoof of the starved creature. The Wendigo looked down, its massive antlers scraping against the drywall. It looked down at the shattered glass. The bleached skull reflected in the shards. Its piercing eyes hovered over the printed image. I cannot tell what it was, but the image seemed to provoke the entity. It groaned and slashed at the image, tearing it to shreds. The towering, emaciated forest spirit tilted its head and squeezed through the door. Yellow wallpaper hung from its antlers like confetti, occasionally glistening in the stray beams of sun leaking through the clouds. It shuffled closer, its hooves clacking on the wooden porch. The porch creaked and groaned under the weight of the Wendigo. It paused for a moment, its eyes scanning us curiously. It wobbled on its skinny legs and shuddered from a cold. My lips bled as they dried. We stood there for what felt like hours, waiting for the creature to do anything. We couldn't run from it or fight it. However, it didn't appear to want to kill us. Yet, the head stopped turning, its gaze directed at me. Kyle and Lucy watched me, waiting for my reaction. Frozen tears had solidified against their faces. "Why?" The Wendigo whispered, its mystical voice echoing like a divine spirit. I took a step back, startled. However, I remained silent. I wanted to know what it was about to say. "Why do you feel warm?" It spoke slowly, as if processing each word carefully before saying them. "Warm," I stuttered. The Wendigo's fingers twitched involuntarily. It hunched over, peering at me. He was cold when I recovered from him. The Wendigo's eyes darted towards the front door, now stained with blood. But you are warm. I tried unsuccessfully to stop myself from shaking uncontrollably. The Wendigo breathed heavily, each breath an Arctic breeze. It thrust out a thin hand, slashing at me. Before my head was removed, the hand retracted, clutching onto its ribcage. Its long fingers grasped firmly on the chest, squeezing tightly. Startled, the Wendigo looked down at its arm. He is resilient. The famine's spirit whispered. Same as you. It pointed to me, gently brushing my cheek with its claw. Something on its hand caught my eye. Right below the thumb, close to the palm, it had 2 red splotches. Birthmarks. The same birthmarks I had. It all made sense. My grandfather was greedy and self-centered. My parents didn't like inviting him to family meetings. He had no interest in me. Still, I didn't expect it to be that bad. The thing that has been pursuing me was my own grandfather. The Wendigo stared me down. It squeezed its own neck until it collapsed. Lucy and Kyle backed away. What? They tried reasoning with themselves. As the Wendigo began to move once more, we ran back to town. A part of me wanted to stay and comfort what was once my grandfather, even if he was trash. I knew that it wouldn't let me see my grandfather again. Clarence Barkley lived his life alone. He accumulated a large amount of money and died alone. The Wendigo took advantage of his greed. Somehow, my grandfather fused with the forest spirit to become a functional entity. That's my current theory, at least. The Wendigo was weak on its own, scrambling desperately to blend with the ecosystem as an autonomous life form. When it gained humanity, it yearned for more. For me, it's been a rough month. Every day, I watch the forest, waiting to hear a whisper or scream. I wait for something to happen. The Wendigo has not appeared since. My friends haven't showed up either, probably because I'm related to a Wendigo. Second story, the wind ship. There's a certain area of the Catskills that is hard to locate, but that certain unlucky hikers happen upon from time to time. At this place, the trees seem to exist in a perpetual state of decay, even during the sunniest, most flowery spring. The ground is gripped with weeds and littered with brown plastic bottles and sticky candy wrappers, and you'll rarely, if ever, spot any wildlife there. Sometimes you might see a lone crow perched upon some high, precarious branch, and it'll stare at you perfectly still and quiet, seeming to warn you with its beady black eyes that you ought not venture any farther. When most people find this place, they know instinctively to turn around. They'll have some sort of sensation, something like a chilly wind blowing cold, wet leaves onto their neck, and they'll find themselves deeply uneasy. They'll perceive the eerie stillness of the place. They'll experience a feeling like they are standing in the woods in the middle of the night, even if it's the brightest morning hour. And they turn away. But not all do. If you decide to push onward from this point, you'll have to fight through a dense thicket of forest before eventually reaching a clearing, a wide expanse of flat land that might have been the site of some Puritan settlement that stood more than 200 years ago, only to be swallowed by the wilderness and lost to time. You'll see 5 or 6 stone chimneys standing alone, spaced fairly evenly apart. The wooden houses they once belonged to are all long gone, lost to fire from lightning strikes, or simple rot from lack of upkeep. In place of these houses, the land is now dotted with primitive little huts made of sticks and mud, erected by the people who currently live there. If you search the grounds, you'll find artifacts like a metal lock that perhaps once joined together the wooden framework of a pillory, something that the village, for lack of a better descriptor, didn't have any need for nowadays. If you continue to explore this place, eventually you'll be surprised to come across a tall, imposing edifice, a whitewashed and steepled church, standing in the midst of the clearing, sturdy and pristine, even though it would seem no one is around to care for it. How it managed to survive for centuries while the other buildings in the area seemed to easily give way to the elements, no one in the village could ever figure out. I heard various rumors about this church when I was a member of the village myself. It is said that it once doubled as a school and that around the late 1700s, an itinerant teacher. Some say Irving's inspiration for Ichabod Crane. Once taught there before he was summarily deposed and fatally mauled by the Winship, who has since called the church his home. The Winship is no headless horseman. He is no Bigfoot, no Jersey Devil, no skunk ape, no hog bear. He isn't even a rawhead or a bloody bones. And I don't think he's a Wendigo either. Rather, he's a creature with the body of a man, standing a little over 6 feet tall, weighing probably a little over 200 pounds. He has long, slender arms that are oddly stiff, as if carved from wood, and they are totally black, as if covered in soot. His hands are tiny and always grabbing and reaching and fidgeting, like the hands of a tricky, conniving little gremlin or raccoon. His legs likewise are slender, but I never saw what they looked like, for he always wore navy dress pants to match his navy suit. Where he got this suit no one in the village really knew, but it was so modern-looking, we all figured he must have grabbed it off some hapless victim who wandered into his domain not very long ago. But then again, who hikes in the Catskills wearing such formal attire? The Winship's head is like that of a fox, or perhaps it's like that of a wolf, if a wolf had bitten into a can of orange spray paint and found his fur permanently stained. Or maybe the head was more similar to some orange coyotes, or maybe even a hyena. It's hard to say. Really, it resembled the head of no other animal on earth, but a fox or wolf or some sort of vicious canid with unnaturally bright, fiery orange fur is the best way I can describe it. Most of the people in the village were born there, with no outside knowledge of the world. However, some of the members of the village are outsiders, like I was. I came upon the Winship's domain when I was a young man newly graduated from Columbia. I devised a hiking trip in the Catskills ahead of starting my career, and I wound up trapped under the Winship's rule for years. I was one of the last immigrants, as it were, that the Winship accepted into his little country, for over time, he'd built up a sizable group of worshippers who'd multiplied by inbreeding, and he soon decided there was no need to let anyone else in. The Winship liked me, I'm deeply ashamed to admit, because in order to preserve myself, I became close to him and helped him keep the people in line. How he kept the people in line was by turning them against each other, for he knew that if they ever collaborated, they had the potential to overthrow him. For example, one day the Winship and I met in his church, and he squawked at me in his loud voice that was rough and sounded a lot like the cry of a bird of prey mixed with some sort of strange dinosaurian roar. He told me that he was angry at some of the first-generation villagers, the ones who'd come from the outside, because they were teaching their children not to be racist. Little boys, when they'd come across one of the village's few black members, would cry, with genuine terror, "It's a bear, man, Mommy!" spraying spittle everywhere because too much inbreeding had made their mouths oddly shaped and unable to properly hold all of their teeth. And the haggard mothers would say, speaking slowly and lifelessly, now, Donnie, that isn't nice to say," or now, Johnny, that nice man ain't no bear. And the Winship simply couldn't have this. So he told me something had to be done to keep the distraction of racism alive and well, so the people would never get ideas to work together against him. So the Winship, in the dead of night, slunk into the woods and killed and skinned a black bear. Then he dressed me in the bear's fur and had me loot the huts of every white member of the village, stealing their weekly rations of berries and deer meat and anything else they happened to hold dear. I remember vividly finding artifacts from some of the people's old lives. Hiking gear, slips of green paper depicting George Washington that now, simply because they were in a new place, held no value, and even 1 or 2 dead smartphones that seemed to have indentions in them from people gripping them so hard, perhaps using them as mirrors, desperately searching for their old selves by looking through a glass darkly, or maybe imagining the photos of loved ones that used to be stored in there. Camera rolls. As you can imagine, my plundering in my bearskin suit caused quite the panic, and the morning after, when all the people's treasures were hidden in the Winship's church, he screamed that a certain black member of the village was to blame, a man called Lloyd, if I recall. In an instant, most every white member of the village turned on Lloyd, and the ones who didn't at first felt compelled to. They took stones and threatened to pelt Lloyd with them unless he gave them their goods back. I remember the animal fear in his eyes clear as day, him madly stammering that he hadn't taken anything from anyone and trembling like a rabbit cornered by a fox. Seeing Lloyd was weak and vulnerable, the Winship lunged forward, caught him by the throat, hurtled him to the ground, and stamped upon his head, crushing it like a melon until blood gushed from his nose and ears. He continued his stamping, moving to Lloyd's neck and pounding into it as he screamed until his screaming finally died and his breathing ceased. After that, every other black member of the village fled in fear, escaping into the woods, taking their chances with whatever beast lay beyond, for none could be as horrible as the Winship. And just like that, there were significantly fewer people who could stand up to the Winship. And for a while, he was pleased with this. But then, one day, he reasoned that there were still a good number of people left who could revolt against him. He thought about the upcoming winter, which was sure to be harsh, and how, despite his efforts to keep the village members safe from the cold in his church, several of the weaker ones would die off. He discussed with me if this was something he wanted, but then it dawned on him, mid-conversation, that if everyone was gone, he'd have no one left to worship him. I told him, a bit sheepishly, that he'd always have me, and then I frowned and felt my stomach drop, realizing just how nightmarish a scenario that would be. Sure, the Winship pouted, but I always want a crowd, you know. A big crowd full of people who love me and who look and act just like me. The Winship then hugged himself and cooed while he swayed back and forth. Then, in the next moment, he hatched an idea as to how to create more people that loved him, not just loved him, but looked like him and acted like him. That's what he wanted. The reason why was clear to me from a moment he expressed this wish. He wanted to love as well as to be loved, and he knew well that the only other person he could ever love was someone exactly like himself. This was his genius new plan: impregnate the women himself. All of them. Being an educated man, I had doubts that this would work. The women were human, and he was not. But that didn't seem to matter to him. The Winship announced his plan the following morning, telling every woman in the village that it would be a great honor and privilege to carry his child. The women, however, were unconvinced. Few gave in. Those who didn't, the Winship ordered me and a few other of his trusted confidants to capture if they attempted escape. I was reluctant to do so, to say the least, but I ended up not having to, for the Winship managed to reach down and ferociously grab any woman who attempted to flee from him. I heard their shrieks. I heard their wails of agony. I heard their lives, already plenty hellish, suddenly changed forever and exponentially worsened. And I did nothing. What could I do? I was but one man. Whether the Winship succeeded in getting these women pregnant, I don't know. But something did happen in the course of all this horror that helped catalyze my escape. The Winship pinned down someone whom he took to be another woman as the whole village gazed on. But in a matter of moments, he realized he was really sinking his claws into a long-haired man wearing a flowing garment that could easily have been mistaken for a dress, perhaps something he found discarded in the woods, perhaps something from the outside world one of the first-generation villagers had dropped somewhere. Before this, no one had ever bothered this individual for wearing what he chose or keeping his hair at the length he preferred. But after he humiliated the Winship, many of those who had given themselves over the Winship's lies turned on the man and beat him with their fists. No man in woman clothes. They chanted in their slurred, slow voices as they dealt him vicious blows and scraped and shredded him with their long, dirty nails as he screamed in torment. No man in woman clothes. The only ones who didn't participate in the mauling and killing of this poor man were me and one of the Winship's other confidants, a dour-looking white-haired man called Chance. I remember him glancing at me, mouth slightly open and shaking his head. For some reason, this incident was enough proof for him that not all was good in this place. And from that point on, The remaining members of the village were far more concerned with visions of duplicitous men in women's clothes, more than they were about any threat the Windship posed to them. Every November, the Windship, who keeps a calendar in his church in anticipation of the day, holds an election wherein the people insert slips of paper into a wooden box, writing the name of whom they want to be their leader into the harsh winter and through the next year. Of course, everyone always voted for the Windship, not just because they feared what he'd do if anyone voted differently, but because his church provided the only suitable shelter from the cold, and no one wanted to be shut out or worse. The election was simply the Windship's way of stroking his own ego, of proving to himself that there was no being alive or dead superior to him. Why the Windship thought this way remains a mystery to me. But I've since accepted that there really are some real devils out there, hidden in the black woods of treacherous mountains or brazenly stalking about our own courthouses and halls of government here in the civilized world. The people all lined up in single file in the midst of the village, a piece of paper clasped in their hands. These pieces of paper came from the church. There were pages from the ancient Bibles and hymnals and old-school textbooks that had been left behind by those who once worshipped and tried to learn there. For many of the villagers, the only word they knew how to spell at all was Windship, something their parents taught them specifically for the task of voting for him, so they really didn't have any option to vote against him, even if they wanted to. The Windship, with me and his other confidants flanking him, held the box and grinned greedily as each villager submitted their vote, which they were required to write in their own blood. When all the votes were in, the Windship opened the box and began pulling out the slips. There were 27 villagers total at this point, and he expected no less than 27 votes for him. The Windship read each piece of paper with relish, seeing his name, as he expected, on every single one. But then, in the middle of his tallying the votes, his face fell. His snout quivered. Thin snot began to steadily leak from his nose, and for a moment, it seemed he might cry. Then his huge yellow eyes, with their cat-like pupils, bulged out his head, and he erupted, roaring so volcanically and powerfully that the whole world seemed to shake. Then Bedlam. He hurled the box, striking a young girl in the head with it. He started tearing the slips of paper in his little hands, muttering obscenities and curses as people gathered around the girl, whose eyes were vacant and whose mouth was moving in what might have been a silent prayer. And then the crowd met his wrath. He swiped at them, he pounced upon them, and the whole throng, most of the people, scattered and yelled in wild terror, while those who could not bring themselves to stop loving the Windship watched his rampage in dismay, stupidly unaware that they weren't safe. In the chaos, I decided to flee, as many others were. The last thing I saw of the village was the Windship catching Chance in his claws as he was frantically waving at me, imploring in as loud a voice as he could manage. "Get out of here, Ben. Get out of here while you still can." I did, but not before lunging forward in Chance's direction, thinking I could, somehow, save him. But the Windship's sharp, vampiric teeth were already sinking into his throat, and his eyes were rolling into the back of his head as he emitted a horrible, agonized, gurgling sound. And then the blood really began to flow as the Windship, now all beast, began shaking its head and growling voraciously as it tore into poor Chance's flesh. I ran. Many others ran with me, but to the best of my knowledge, they never made it out of the Catskills. By luck or divine providence, or simply a good memory, I was able to identify my old hiking trail, and I made it back to society, to the real world, and I sit here typing this out as a kind of warning. My fellow Americans, truth is often stranger than fiction. Always be on the lookout for the devils and beasts of this world. Sometimes, like in my case, they're hiding far off the beaten path, but more often than not, they're hiding in plain sight, ready to strike at any moment. I pray you all resist before they do. Fight back if you must. And please, please don't run away like I did, leaving many people to die, crushing a piece of paper under my foot as I fled, a piece of paper with my name scrawled upon it. Third story. My best friend, the Wendigo. Sometimes things happen to us that we just cannot explain, no matter how many resources are available or what information we can find. There are things that can never be understood, and that is a commanding factor of life. Now, a question. I know some, if not many of you have had friends, even best friends that disappear from your life without a rhyme or reason. That very same thing happened to me with my friend Marcus. We were best friends throughout high school and carried the friendship on well into our 20s, but one day he simply disappeared. I don't mean he was reported missing and the police were involved. I just mean he left without telling me, his best friend. I spoke to his mother, and she said he had gone on a trip to northern Alaska. When I asked her why, she said, "He never gave me a reason." I could hear the sorrowful tone in her voice. Like myself, she missed him too. But out of nowhere, he came back. He told no one he had returned, and one day, he showed up on my doorstep as if he had never left. I admit he looked good, better than I remembered. He seemed healthy, if you can understand. "Marcus, you're back," I remarked, bewildered. "Yeah, man," he said in his smooth demeanor. He had his hands tucked into the pockets of the jean jacket he was wearing. "Got back a couple days ago. You look well. Where you been, man?" I asked casually. I noticed his face was flushed red, but it was probably just the lighting outside because the sun was setting. "Yeah, thanks. I've just been traveling, finding myself," he answered, but he seemed indifferent about conversation. It made me wonder why he came here if he wasn't looking to talk. "Well, that's cool. Did you want to come in?" I asked while gesturing my hand through the door. He nodded and brushed past me into my home. "Thanks, Derek," he said nonchalantly, as if this was a routine occurrence. "Something up?" I asked as I closed the door behind me. Marcus flipped his wavy blonde hair and sighed. "No, not really. I just have a proposition for you." It was strange that this was how he decided to start the first conversation between us in a long time. A proposition? Forgive me for saying this, but we haven't spoken in quite some time, man, and I don't know if I'm really in the position to dive head first into something new. "No, it's not like that," began Marcus. He didn't appear slighted by my response, which was welcoming to see. "I was just wondering if you'd be interested in coming with me on a trip. A vacation of sorts. It wouldn't be long. Just a week up north." "With who, you?" I asked with a hint of scrutiny. "Yeah, just me," he said quickly. For some reason, his fingers were twitching like he could barely control himself from having a breakdown of some kind. "Why so sudden? And why me? I mean, Marcus, where have you actually been this whole time? I find it strange you would come to me, of all people, for this hurried request of yours. I need someone to come with me. It's important that you understand, Derek. I'm not the same person I was when I left. I am something much more unique. But I cannot be left to the masses. I must be quelled." He was speaking in completely vague sentences, the context of which I couldn't understand. "I have to be honest with you, Marcus. I don't know what you're saying to me right now." I wasn't going to lie, but I saw a slight shift in his eyes upon hearing my candor. He sat down in my recliner and clasped his hands together. "Listen, are you in or not?" He wouldn't even look me in the face when he asked. He simply hung his head with his eyes on the floor. "Well, I don't know. Where would we be going exactly?" "A cabin up north. Once we get there, I'll give you a list of instructions that you must adhere to. I promise you will understand." I took a deep breath. Clearly, Marcus was in distress and needed help. I wasn't going to leave him to fend off against whatever demons were riding his shoulders. I figured he had become an addict and wanted someone to look after him while he got himself cleaned up. "I suppose," I said quietly. "Awesome. Thanks, Derek," he said hastily. "You won't have to pay for anything. I've got that all covered. Just be ready tomorrow morning and we will head up there." "Tomorrow? Damn, that's definitely short notice." I said, already thinking about what I would tell my boss. "Don't worry about work, man. Just trust me, even if you've never trusted anyone," he remarked as if he read my mind. He then stood up and began walking to the door. "I don't know what happened to you, but something's definitely different," I mentioned as I opened the door for him. "You don't know the half of it," he said before walking outside. "See you in the morning." Bring anything you're comfortable with bringing, but don't overpack. I nodded even though he was facing away from me, and he walked off down the sidewalk. How'd he got here? Obviously, he didn't drive if he was walking. Something seriously weird was going on with him. My boss was fine with me taking some time off. I figured it wouldn't actually last a week anyway, so in my head all would be well. The next morning I was ready to go, and Marcus arrived just after 9 a.m. to pick me up. I brought my things outside. I had only packed some snacks, a flashlight, blankets, a pillow, my medication, and several outfits for the outdoors of life. The cabin has beds and blankets, said Marcus from the driver's seat of the old SUV he arrived in. Yeah, well, I prefer to feel a sense of comfort that I can only achieve by having things that belong to me. If you say so, he remarked. His lack of engagement was already growing stale. I got in the passenger seat, and we sped away without another word shared between us. Every so often, I would glance at Marcus to study him. While he did seem healthy, there was something innately different about him that I couldn't put my finger on. He was jittery, easily startled, and on edge. We drove for a good 6 hours before pulling off at a rest area. Marcus seemed alert, but for some reason he said, "We're going to sleep here for the night." The night? Have you gone blind, dude? It's barely 3 in the afternoon. Yes, I know. I'm hungry and I need to rest, said Marcus quietly. I could drive, man, if that's the issue. I asked reassuringly. He turned to look at me with viciously bloodshot eyes, as if he had been staring at the sun the entire drive. No, you don't know the way. You can tell me the way. I have GPS. No, Derek, just close your eyes or do something for a bit. I'm hungry. The way he said hungry was like a ravenous animal, like his desire to feed was overthrowing his decision-making. Fine. Go get something to eat then, I said, kicking my feet up on the dash and leaning the seat back. Marcus stammered when he responded, "No, not yet. When night falls, I will." You're acting really strange, man. Is everything good? Instead of responding, he only nodded slowly. I didn't say anything back, but I did watch him from the corner of my eye for some time. I noticed he was watching every single person who walked into the rest stop like a starving fiend. I passed the time by reading on my phone, listening to music through my headphones, and after night fell, I closed my eyes. Up until I decided to try and sleep, Marcus hadn't taken his eyes off the entrance of the rest stop. I can't even recall if I saw him blink once. Luckily, I managed to fall asleep relatively quickly. However, I was awoken abruptly when Marcus heaved his body back into the driver's seat as if he were running from something. He was absolutely covered in blood, his mouth and most of his face, his hands, his shirt and pants everywhere. And Marcus, what man? I asked intensely. He swallowed audibly. I feel better now. We can keep going. I could see his teeth stained red from the dim light produced by the rest area. No way, man. They're going to tell me what happened to you. Without looking at me, he said, I had to eat, Derek. We all have to eat. What are you talking about, Marcus? What did you eat? A barrel of blood. Not quite. He then started the vehicle and shifted it into reverse. I reached out and shifted it back into park. When I did, he turned towards me and grabbed my wrist. His grip was insurmountably strong. It felt like he could crush my arm if he had the mind to do it. Derek, let go, was all he said while his entire body was visibly trembling. I didn't know what else to do, so I listened. I carefully brought my hand back to my lap, and he shifted into reverse once more before bringing us back onto the freeway. I couldn't keep my eyes off him, but he wouldn't look at me anymore. Not until we reached the cabin. The overwhelming smell of blood had filled the vehicle, and I had gagged a few times from it. The pungent aroma wafting off Marcus was almost unbearable. I checked my phone. Of course, there was no signal out here, and I caught a glimpse of him watching me from the other side of the SUV. Calling the police is futile, said Marcus through his blood-stained teeth. Tell me what you did back there. I shouted at him, unsure of what else to say. I did what I had to, he said while walking towards the front door of the cabin. Marcus, please, man. I can help. Just tell me what's going on. He froze as if he really was about to answer me, but instead he reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of keys. Then, He unlocked the door and went in without saying another word. I stood outside for a long time. I didn't want to go inside and see him sitting there painted with blood, but something told me that Marcus needed help, so I went in. He was sitting on a dusty couch in fresh clothes. He must have showered too, because his skin was clear of the red tinge that had dominated it before. One thing was different, though. He had lost most of his hair. I don't mean little clumps or bald spots. I mean there were only a few strands of hair remaining. Furthermore, he had patches of raw skin on his face, and I'm sure they were on his body as well. I sat in a chair across from him and observed his seemingly deteriorating form. His eyes were fixed on the rickety floorboards beneath us, and he had his palms placed flat on his thighs. After 5 solid minutes without so much as a twitch, he finally raised his head. His eyes met mine, but his were almost black. There were dark blue veins forming a webbed pattern from the corners of his eye sockets, and his lips were dry and cracked. When he spoke, it was with a breathy and raspy tone. "I'm going to tell you a story, Derek. When I'm finished, you will do something for me. You cannot say no. You must do it. I can't make Promi dash. You must." Marcus suddenly shouted. He had raised himself up further, but something wasn't right. His spine was longer somehow, like it had been stretched, making him appear much taller, even when sitting down. Okay, I said timidly. His shouting struck a drastically fearful chord within me. "Good," he mumbled under his breath. Then he began his story. "As you know, I went to Alaska. It wasn't for nothing. I had actually met a girl up there on an app." He grinned slightly, but it quickly faded. "When I say this, I mean it. She was perfect, well, for me at least." He stopped for a moment, and I noticed he was eyeing my hands, but then he continued. "Anyway, her name was Claire, and we really hit it off. It was one of those love at first sight moments. Seriously, Derek, she was everything I could have ever wanted or needed in a woman." I uttered a sound of acknowledgement, so he knew I was listening as he went on. "She was a simple person, and she lived in an old town. I can't even remember the name of it now, but we made a life for ourselves there. However, she started acting strange. She would ask to have guests over constantly, as if I wasn't enough. I don't say that in a jealous way. I mean, she literally wanted someone else over every single day, and she reeked of desperation. It was like her life depended on it." While he spoke, one of his fingernails fell off and landed with a quiet, ticking sound on the floor. Marcus didn't seem to mind because he kept talking. Eventually, I caved. I invited one of her friends over, a local guy who worked at the town's bakery. About an hour before he arrived, Claire called me into the bedroom. She had this weird, almost evil tone in her voice, but I disregarded it. I thought that she may have been looking to get intimate before this friend of hers arrived, but that wasn't the case at all. "Are you sick, Marcus?" I asked as I watched 2 more fingernails slide off his fingers onto the floor. He didn't answer me, not directly anyway. He looked up at me, and his left eye clouded over with a milky white color. Was he dying right before me? Marcus picked at one of the scaly gray patches of skin on his hand. It only made his other nails fall off, but he didn't seem to mind or notice because he went on. As I entered our bedroom, the door closed behind me. Claire was standing there with a rope and a gag. That only solidified my assumption about her need for intimacy, so I let her tie me up. But instead of getting frisky, she gagged me and left the room. I tried to get her attention, but obviously she couldn't hear me. "How long were you like that?" I asked gently. I wanted him to feel like I had genuine interest. "Longer than I expected." I heard her friend come inside, and I tried to yell to get his attention, but it was no use. That's when the screams started. There were horrendous noises of agony coming from the other room, and they weren't from Claire. He sighed again faintly. During the conversation, his entire body had begun turning a pale gray color, and the last bits of hair he had left fell to the floor. There was this squelching sound, and another sound I can only liken to a saw cutting meat. I hated every moment being tied to that bed in our barely lit room. "Where are you going with all of this, Marcus? Are you saying Claire killed her friend?" "She didn't just kill him, Derek. She ate him." "What?" I exclaimed vehemently as my stomach turned. "Yeah, she ate him, and when she was full, she brought the scraps of what was left into the bedroom. She removed the gag and told me if I didn't eat, she would consume my flesh as well. Did you do it? I asked with curiosity. He looked down and then up before slowly nodding. I did. Marcus. Man, I don't know what to say. Just keep listening, he said solemnly. I had to hold my mouth open while she let the blood of her friend drip inside. She told me that if I did, then I'd never be sick again. I'd never worry about anything but eating. It made me remember all the times she had gone out for the night, only to come back looking more youthful than before. I shifted in the chair, and Marcus stared at my hands again for far too long. I was growing uncomfortable by his lustful gaze. The next time he spoke, his voice had diminished into something gravelly and hoarse. I did not fight her, I did what she asked. I hoped that she had just lost her mind, and when she was satisfied, I'd make my escape. But I was wrong. The flesh, that is, the consumption of it made me a new being. It gave me strength, vitality, and an iron constitution. I felt the best I had ever felt in years, but then came the hunger. Hunger? I questioned calmly, although I was reminded of when he mentioned how hungry he was at the rest area. Yes, Derek. The hunger for human flesh was insatiable. It didn't matter how much I ate. My body would feel like it had been further deprived of sustenance. I craved warm, running blood, almost like a vampire, and Claire did too. Before we knew it, we had slaughtered the entire town, and nobody saw it coming. But after that, Claire, she turned into something feral, something less human and more animalistic. Like you are now. I asked with a hint of concern. Yes, she became this creature. It was grotesque and malformed. She wasn't my Claire anymore. So I did what any loving partner would do. I put her out of her misery. You killed her. I ended her suffering. I see. That's when I came back down here. I couldn't live up there alone, but I also realized I couldn't be left alive at all. Derek, I desperately want to be with Claire again, whether there's still a place for my soul in heaven or if I'll be sentenced to an eternal hell for the things I've done. As long as Claire's there, I'll be happy. What are you saying exactly, Marcus? I want you to kill me. You what? I admit, I chuckled a little because the notion was ridiculous. I wanted to take the shotgun out of the gun safe and blow my head off so I can't devour another innocent person. Marcus was being serious. I could tell by his tone, and the longer this conversation went on, the more his body changed. I finally managed to ask the question I had desperately wanted to know the answer to. Did you eat someone at the rest area? I ate an entire family, he said without remorse. I didn't know what to say. What could you say? All I could do was gasp while remaining at a loss for words. I called the police from the payphone afterwards, so they should be there now. He began harshly. I chose that particular rest area because the cameras don't work. I had staked it out before even coming to you. It was all planned. But I did it for you. For me. You ate an entire family for me. No. I mean, I made it so you couldn't be connected to what happened. The police are none the wiser, and in reality, you've done nothing wrong. This is up, Marcus. I know. I'm sorry, Derek. I need you to honor my request now, though, before it's too late. What happens if I don't? I asked out of curiosity. Marcus stood up hulkingly tall and groaned a bellowing, low, rumbling roar. You cannot deny my desire for death. In my pain, like I ended the pain for Claire. His breathing was rapid and fierce, but he managed to calm himself down. I apologize for scaring you, he said in his gruff voice. Marcus, you were my best friend once. I can't kill you. You have to. This is why I came to you, because you still are my best friend, and I didn't want to ask a random stranger. They wouldn't understand, but you can understand. His face grew long, and it was accompanied by many painful grunts by Marcus. I need you to do this for me. I do not want to hurt anyone else. Even now, the hunger calls to me. It is taking every ounce of strength I have left to resist lashing out at you and devouring every tasty morsel of flesh covering your ripe and ravishingly delicious body. He shook his head like a madman before his eyes met mine once again. Please, Derek, I am begging you. I don't know what changed in me, but hearing my once best friend pleading for his death no longer perturbed my emotions. I stared at his rapidly transforming body for an indeterminate amount of time before getting up and walking to the gun safe. It was already unlocked. He must have done that while I waited outside. I reached in and grabbed the only gun in the case, the shotgun Marcus had mentioned. I assumed it was already loaded. If Marcus had planned this much, then surely he planned that too. I walked back to the chair and sat down, and a gnarled, black-toothed grin spread on Marcus's veiny, gray face. "Thank you, Derek. I can't live with myself any longer, and this is the best option. Do not take pity on me. Do not feel guilty or ashamed. Take pride in the fact that you have expelled a ruthless creature from this world." I pumped the shotgun and aimed it at his head. My heart was pounding and my hand was sweating. "Oh, one more thing," he remarked. "In the glove box of the SUV are my life savings. Take it all and do with it what you will. I ask that you never tell my mother about this, or anyone else. It will be our secret." He then took one last deep breath. "Okay, I'm ready. Do it." Just as I was pulling the trigger, Marcus's body twisted and contorted into a far more disturbing visage, and as the shot rang throughout the cabin, his blood and viscera splattered against the couch, the floors, the walls, and even the ceiling. His painful shrieking stopped, and his body ceased all movements. It was over. I sat there with the shotgun in my lap, still aimed at Marcus's corpse for most of the day. I couldn't bring myself to get up or do anything else but stare at my headless former best friend. Eventually, I found the will to stand. After I was on my wobbly 2 feet, I took a sheet from one of the bedrooms and draped it over Marcus. I searched the entire grounds of the cabin for a shovel because I wanted to bury him, but I couldn't find one. It was cold outside anyway, and I'm sure he wouldn't want me to die from digging his grave. I did, however, find some matches. It was the middle of winter, so I thought it would be better to just burn the cabin down. I didn't want Marcus's body to rot there on the cold couch, and as I dropped the lit match on it, the fabric immediately engulfed into a mighty blaze. I walked out of the cabin and got into the driver's seat of the SUV, and that's when I remembered Marcus had the keys. I couldn't help but laugh about the irony of it all. Marcus had left 10 grand in the glove box for me. I ended up having to hike down the driveway and up the road until someone stopped to pick me up. They drove me to the nearest town, Grand Marais, I think it was called. It was a small town, but the people were friendly. I rented a room at their local inn and have been here for 3 days just thinking about Marcus and what he went through. I thought about if I was responsible for the family he murdered and ate, but I had no idea what was going on at the time. I was only along for the ride until I had to play my part, my role in ending Marcus's painful life. If your best friend or even friend returns to you after having been gone and without contact for years, be careful if they ask for you to take a trip with them. And always remember, the mysteries of the world can outweigh grounded reality. Nothing is as it seems, even Marcus. Be safe, everyone. I hope none of you look down on me. Thanks a lot for watching the video. Till the end, subscribe to Horror in Detail for more videos. Drop your suggestions in comment section.